So it's almost like when you are in kindergarten and you look at the fourth graders and you're like looking at what they're wearing and what they're doing. And it's like, I want to be like them one day. That's kind of how the first year fellows, I feel like, are treating this process. We're looking at the third years who are, again, I'll use my analogy, the bells of the ball. They're getting recruited, they're getting job offers, they're signing contracts. It's super exciting. You're living kind of vicariously through them.
This episode was brought to you by Prelude Fertility, where top REI physicians find their calling. Practice anywhere with Prelude. The Prelude Network is the fastest growing network of fertility clinics in North America. With more than 90-plus locations, we're ready to support you and your individual career aspirations wherever they lead. To learn more, please visit rei.preludefertility.com. That's rei.preludefertility.com. Today's advertiser helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertiser. The advertiser does not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertiser.
You're welcome, people who are trying to recruit fertility doctors. I got a little bit ahead of the curve for you. I went out and found a sharp, engaged, first-year REI fellow. And I asked her about how she's trying to influence her fellowship to design her career. Dr. Morgan Wilhoite might be a focus group of one, but pay attention to what she's paying attention to. And if you're an REI fellow thinking about what kind of career you want after fellowship, or you're an OBGYN resident who's interested in going into the field of REI, you should pay attention too, because we uncover advice to make sure that you're getting a proper cross-section of people to talk to. That isn't just the kindergartners looking up to the fourth graders, to paraphrase Dr. Wilhoite. We talk about particular resources that you should be consuming to get smart about how you're going to build your REI career. We talk about the particular areas of interest that Dr. Wilhoite is interested in learning more about in fellowship, which I think is of value to you so that you get an idea of the trends of what it is that these young REIs want to work on. And we also talk about why Privademic might become the default model for young REIs' career preferences. Based on Dr. Wilhoite's experiences, I give some advice to those that are recruiting young fertility docs, how to get ahead of the curve and not just be in a dead dash to the finish when it comes to contract time. I hope you enjoy this fun, lively conversation with Dr. Morgan Wilhoite. Dr. Wilhoite, Morgan, welcome to the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thanks, Griffin. I'm so excited to be here.
It's been a while since I've had a first-year fellow on the program before, and I've had many different fellows at different points. Probably most of them have been second or third year, and sometimes the reaction is like, "Well, why are you having fellows on? What do they know? Like, what do they know yet?" There's a reason why I do it. A couple of different reasons. I think it's always useful just to constantly stay abreast of what it is that people are interested in, what they're up to, and most of my audience is recruiting REIs, and they're either recruiting REIs or they're younger REIs that are thinking about the next phase in their career, and so maybe you can't advise those folks, or maybe you can. Maybe there might be a nugget that helps them, but it also helps the folks that are thinking about the docs that they want to recruit, that they want to have as part of their team. Not just for next year, but staying on the pulse of what the upcoming class of fertility physicians is interested in, I think is important. And so I'm interested in, now that we're recording this in January of 24, which makes you halfway through your first year of REI fellowship. What did you set out to accomplish in your fellowship? Obviously studying the subspecialty, but like, what did you want to use it to frame your career?
It's funny that we started out here because when I was preparing for REI interviews, I actually came across my file of all of my video recordings where I was kind of talking to myself, interviewing myself about how I was going to answer certain questions. And I started rewatching them just out of curiosity while I was preparing for this. And I realized, I'm halfway through first year and I'm still relatively bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when it comes to being an REI fellow. But I was even more so when I was preparing for these interviews because I found myself just all over the place. I was wanting to do an MBA while I was pursuing fellowship, and wanting to do, the reproductive surgery scholars track, and wanting to do some sort of a track where I did genetics incorporated into it. And as you can see, I was kind of like all over the place. I wanted to do everything. Luckily, I
This
have
is when? This is like as you're applying for fellowships? This is like third year of residency?
Yes, exactly. I found myself just, wanting to do everything REI. So it was funny to watch that back now since I'm a year and a half, 2 years out from that. But when I now think about what I want to get out of fellowship, I'm really not only wanting to be a well-trained REI, and with that lately comes with the bread and butter IVF, right? That's what most REIs are doing. But I am at a program where it's very academic and we are still seeing a lot of bread and butter endocrine. So we're doing a lot of hypo, we're doing thyroid disorder, we're doing a lot of PCOS patients. So a good majority of our patients that we see are not actively trying to get pregnant. So I think that I am in a unique situation at this program where we're not just doing a million IVF cycles a year. We are very busy with IVF, but we're also seeing general GYN and endocrinology. So I think getting out of fellowship, I want to be a well-trained reproductive endocrinologist. So I want the full scope of endocrinology and the infertility side of things. Also, I want to, as much as I wish I could say I want to be a full-time researcher. And I listened to your podcast episode with Dr. Devine about Privademics. I do want to still incorporate research into my practice in some way, working with residents or fellows, probably more in the Privademic setting, but it's ever changing and I am still a first year. So I guess to answer your question, there are a lot of different avenues that I want to take to get really just the full scope of REI out of my fellowship.
When did you start to pare back these really broad interests that you had? Like how much do I want to delve into genetics? Do I want to get an online MBA? When did you start to pare that back?
Great question. When I realized that doing all of those things was not not possible. I always joke I need like 10 more hours in every single day. And you really do realize once you start fellowship that you're not really a master of none, you're a master of one, and you are super specialized in this field, which is one of the things that I love about it. So I'm realizing now, the further I get into fellowship, that I really want to find my niche and figure out what it is that I'm going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And unfortunately, that can't be everything. That's just not realistic for any person to do all of those things.
But when did that happen? Is this like after you started fellowship, you're like, "Oh, maybe I won't get my MBA right now."
Once I realized how busy I was in fellowship, which was surprising. I guess I thought that I would be less busy than residency, but I think I find myself working harder, more cerebrally than I did in residency. So probably once I started.
You might be as well. You made an important caveat with cerebrally in that you're not doing the same number of hours, presumably, as residency.
Right.
But you might be the first person that I've heard say that I'm working more in fellowship than I did in residency. Talk more about that.
Yeah. So in residency, there's a lot of doing. There's a lot of checking on laboring patients and actively managing patients that are in the hospital. But in fellowship, there is a lot more thinking that's involved than it was in OBGYN residency. In residency, you kind of react to situations that come at you, whether that's through triage or patients changing their status on labor and delivery or in the med surge after surgeries. But in REI, it's a lot more planning ahead, talking to patients about their future cycles or previous cycles, talking them about their embryos that are currently frozen, working through the things that they feel important for future family building, and less of reacting. So it's more thinking, it's more preparing ahead of time.
So the fact that you started to realize, okay, maybe some of these other things will have to come later. Right now, my focus is going to be on the full scope of endocrinology and fertility. That suggests to me that that was not revealed to you during the interview process and the application process. Why am I inferring correctly? And if I am, why is that the case?
I think that when you are interviewing for any kind of a job, you start just thinking of all the possibilities of things that you can do. And I wouldn't say I was misled at all, but I was definitely, you know, just starry eyed thinking all of what the future has to hold and offer. And it does have those things. You just really have to narrow it down and find a niche, because being the person, the go to person on genetics, being the go to person on reproductive surgery, the go to person on all things IVF, on endocrinology, on the business side of medicine. It's impossible to do all of those things, but very aspirational of Morgan 2 years ago when she thought she was going to be able to do all these things in one career. But it's been kind of fun to see the things that I thought that I could do one day, and now kind of see the things that I want to do one day.
I'm going to put you on the spot with a question that I'm going to start asking everybody when we start talking about this topic, because I wonder if it's time. But what you're talking about really is this the trend that all fields of medicine and most sectors of the economy are moving to, where the specialty becomes subspecialty, which becomes subdivided specialty, and ad infinitum, right? And so I wonder, when we live in that type of world, should we still be having should we still be sending 18 to 22-year-olds to undergrad as a prerequisite for medical school? What do you think about that? I know I didn't prepare you for that. We didn't talk about that at all, but I'm curious in what you think.
I love that question. I think about this all the time, actually, because in let me even go further back. In high school, it's really hard as an 18-year-old to say, I want to be a doctor in general, let alone like what kind of doctor you want to be, right? So I do think there is a period of growth that going to college and getting a bachelor's degree has. There's perks to that, right? You grow a lot in college. You realize what you want to do. You kind of live the fun part of your life that you never really get back, that freedom of just exploring. So I think there is a place for it for sure, but there are a lot of years between high school and fellowship where I feel like things could be narrowed a bit. One of those is, I will die on this hill, but fourth year of medical school. Everyone knows that fourth year of medical school, you're kind of just hanging out. You're doing, what you want to be doing. You're ending your year on rotations where you can, for lack of a better word, chill, because you've already taken step one. You've already applied to residency. You probably already matched into residency. So I do think fourth year of medical school is a little bit overkill. It's kind of a very expensive vacation, so to speak, at least the second half of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to residency, and this is another probably hot take on my end, but for OBGYN residency, I spent, 4 years delivering babies, doing hysterectomies, doing the bread and butter OBGYN stuff, and didn't do, any REI besides my my one required rotation, and then the additional things that I sought out because I wanted to pursue REI as a field. So I think that OBGYN eventually, I know there's been discussions of it so far, but becoming more of tracks into either the GYN track or the OB track, because while I think it's important that I knew how at one point to deliver a baby, am I ever going to be delivering babies as an REI? No. And I spent 4 years, perfecting that skill and doing thousands of deliveries. So a long answer to your question that I really, really liked was there's a lot of places where you can kind of dial back on how much training you need to do this career being REI.
Yeah, and I'm the reason I asked the question, even though it's a bit of a digression, is I think it plays into how you're deciding what you want to do next with your career. And at this point in your fellowship, you decided, okay, I've had to be broader in these I had to be more broad in residency, delivering all these babies. I had to have all these different rotations, fourth year of medical school, when I already knew what I was going to specialize in, et cetera. That there is a spectrum of where we need to build a rudimentary foundation for different areas of medicine, but then we might be staying in that rudimentary phase for too long and not moving and wasting time where we could be specializing, especially when we need to further subspecialize and then further subdivide subspecialties as the field advances and gets more complex.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, full disclosure, I'm 32, and I'm very early on in fellowship, so I'll be 34 when I graduate, and I will be looking for my very first job at 34. And then there will be times in my career where I want to maybe do something a little bit different and further subdivide, as you described it. And I could be in my mid 40s or even 50 when that happens. And you really spend so much of your life leading up to this career that you've worked your whole life for. And maybe by that time, your career that you've worked so hard for, that you found your niche, might only be 10 years after that, if that.
As pioneers in reproductive health care, Prelude Fertility invites you to join an extraordinary mission to transform the way fertility treatments are delivered. What sets the Prelude Network apart? It's the people. We're home to some of the most skilled and compassionate fertility experts in the industry. Prelude fertility doctors have been recognized with numerous prestigious awards, including Top Doctors, America's Top Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and many others. Our culture is one of collaboration and shared knowledge, where learning from each other is just as important as learning from our experiences. Prelude's facilities are a testament to innovation, equipped with the most advanced tools in reproductive science. This means you, as a fertility specialist, will have everything you need to provide care that's not just effective, but transformative for the fertility field. The Prelude Network is the fastest growing fertility network in North America, with over 90 locations. This growth isn't just about numbers. It's about providing you with the flexibility and security to build a career that aligns with both your professional and personal aspirations. The impact you'll have at Prelude is profound. We've helped bring over 165,000 babies into the world, and each day offers a new chance to change lives. Your expertise and care have the power to turn hopeful dreams into joyful realities, crafting stories of hope and family. So why join Prelude? Because here, you're part of something bigger. You're at the forefront of a movement that's constantly evolving, pushing the boundaries of fertility care. Together, we can shape a brighter future for families and set new standards in healthcare. Discover how you can be part of what's next in fertility. Visit rei.preludefertility.com and take the first step toward a career that's as fulfilling as it is trailblazing. That's rei.preludefertility.com.
Do you think, with regard to finding that first job, do you think about it in those terms with your fellowship, that I am trying to craft what I want to get out of that first job. It's going to be the first time where I'm not applying to residency and getting matched somewhere and fellowship matched somewhere. I get to actually have some agency here. Do you think about how you're setting up your first job, or do you look at your fellowship more generally and saying, well, this is what I want to study, this is the knowledge I want to get, and then the job will come later?
I think kind of both. I like the word that you said, agency, there, because this is a weird feeling. I don't know if I would describe it as weird, more just I've never been in this position before where you're not trying so hard to prove yourself to get to the next step. All through high school, you're trying to get into a good college. Through college, if you know you want to go to medical school, you're trying to do everything to put yourself in a good position to get into medical school. Through medical school, you're putting yourself in that position to match into a good residency. And then through residency, same thing to get into fellowship. So there's all these, I like to call it leading a life of contingency. It's like, I will get to the next step and be happy when I'm an REI fellow. And now I'm kind of at that stage where it's like, okay, I've gotten into all of these things that I've strived to get into the place that I am now. And now I get to really learn and craft my future the way I see it and the way I want to do it. And it's an odd feeling because I've never gotten to do that before. I've always been trying to do the things to make me look perfect on paper for the job that I eventually want. And now I definitely have to rearrange my mindset to think, okay, what can I do now to put myself into the best position to be the doctor that I want to be, to work at the practice that I want to work at, because now it's going to get to be my choice where I want to go and what I want my niche to be.
To what extent as a first year are you able to shape your education to prepare how you want to practice in the future?
Yeah, so I think I'm lucky at my program because my attendings, it's kind of a close knit program. We have now four full-time faculty, and they work really closely with you so you can get out of fellowship what you feel like you need to get out of it to do what you want to do. Of course, I'm at an academic program, and I wish more people wanted to go into academics, and I do, and I love it. But there are other things, of course, that I'm interested in, and I feel well supported to do that. For instance, my program is set up where the first 6 months, you're kind of learning the ropes from what we call the IVF Fellow. So you're learning kind of how cycles go. You're doing more of the low tech stuff, ovulation induction, IUIs. And then you're also rotating through outside services. So for instance, I rotated my first 6 months through adult endocrine, through pediatric endocrine, where I did a lot of Turner syndrome clinics and transgender medicine. I did DSD clinic, and we do some genetics in there too. And then I was actually told by my program that if I found something else that I was interested in learning more about, if I could, make that connection and set that up for myself and it would be helpful for my future career, then I was encouraged to do that. So I spent a considerable amount of time with peds endocrine because I was very passionate about fertility preservation and those populations, oncofertility, and then pediatric, like Turner syndrome and Coleman's and the transgender clinics. So there were things that I was given a lot of autonomy on being able to explore further. And I feel very lucky to have had that opportunity in my program. And then once January of your first year hits, you are the IVF fellow for 12 months. So it's you in the clinic every day, doing the retrievals, doing the transfers, and it's less, more structured, less you get to choose what you do. But to answer your question, there is a little bit in there your first year to get to explore and kind of tweak how you want your career to look and explore that. But then, yes, once you become IVF fellow, it's much more structured, which I think is a good mix.
Is that to say that in your career you want to either be researching more and more of the latest in endocrine, or that you want to be focused more on on endocrine patients as opposed to doing IVF?
Not necessarily, but I want to have a lot of that background knowledge to be able to do some of those fertility preservation cycles for patients that have like Turner's mosaic or oncofertility. And I think because I was able to explore that so much in my first 6 months, I now have an idea of what that would look like in a future practice, taking those patients in, especially the pediatric patient population. There are some centers that don't do a lot with fertility preservation for the pediatric population for various reasons. So I think being able to explore those different things in endocrine and the different genetic things were definitely aiding to the ability to kind of figure out what I want to do later on.
Right now, is Privademic at the top of your list if you're thinking of practices in general categories, academic or independently owned or part of a network or Privademic? Is that at the top of your list?
I think so. And again, this is, I'm still in that starry-eyed first year fellow thing where I could see myself doing a lot of different things, but definitely being able to mentor and teach on a medical student level, resident, fellow level. I want to be involved in education. And in doing so, I wouldn't like to be involved in those different levels of research, helping medical students, residents, and fellows get research projects off the ground, helping them kind of understand how to read research, all of the things that my mentors have done for me getting to this point. So Privademic seems like kind of the way of the future. And I love that word. I love that you just did this podcast with Dr. Devine about this because I don't want REI to lose that in the future. I don't want it to just be everybody doing IVF cycles and nothing else. I think that there's definitely an advantage to keeping the research going, keeping providers in groups that want to be research mentors and just mentors in general of trainees.
When you say that Privademic seems like the way of the future, is that also to say that it is the future default of REI fellows' preferences? Like, because when I talk to fellows, some of them want to do research full time, but not too many. Like, real anecdotally, I'm thinking 1 out of 5, something like that. Very few want to start their own private practice, but also very few that I could think of would say that they don't want to do any research. And maybe that changes as they've been practicing for 3 or 5 years. And like, I'm good not doing the research. I want to do as many cases as possible and see as many patients as possible. And then the rest of the time with my family or something else, going to get that MBA. But it seems to me like, at least coming out of fellowship, very few people are saying that they don't want to do research, and not very few, but few people are saying that that's all that they want to do. So do you think that Privademic is going to be the default for that reason?
I hate to call it a default because it just seems like this perfect mix of clinical and academic, which is exactly what it sounds like in the name. But for lack of a better word, I guess, yes, default. It does kind of seem like that's the way things are going because all of these companies that are now owning or partnering with academic centers, there are very few academic centers that are just purely academic anymore. And I agree with you. I don't see many fellows graduating saying, I want a full career in just research. And I think part of that maybe, this is me speculating, but maybe because people don't want to lose that ability to communicate with patients and do more of that bedside doctoring. And I think that's a skill that you just get better at with time, communicating to patients in ways that they understand because REI is confusing. It's confusing to patients to talk them through an IVF cycle. So I think that it's probably, the way of the future because it's a good way to hold on to both without having to give up one or the other. But I would love to know how many fellows graduate saying they want to continue doing research and academics, and then how many 10 years later are still doing research and academics. I feel like that would be an interesting number.
Yeah, me too. Because I suspect that it's different. I
Yeah,
suspect because people would just say, "Yeah, I want to stay involved in the research," but then when you get into the real life of work and family and career, and I wonder how much that changes. But
right.
default might not be the preferred word, but to your point, if it really is the perfect mix, then it's better that the default is the perfect mix as opposed
Right.
to a much lousier alternative.
And
Uh,
again, it's easy for me to say because I don't have children. I'm not married. So it's easy for me to go home and read or work on research and that kind of thing. But, in 10 years from now, if I have children and a family, my priorities may change. So you just never know what your future is going to look like until you're in it.
Are you thinking about jobs right now? Like, are you starting to talk to folks? Like, what level of research are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky that I have Meg 2 years ahead of me. You and I both know Megan Sachs. I'm gonna give a shout out to her on this. But she has been instrumental and, a mentor to me going through this whole process. And she kind of, plants little seeds of, hey, this is a really good group. These people are hiring. And she knows, I know I'm a free agent. I'm not stuck to one place. And again, I don't have a family that I would have to uproot to a different part of the country. So I would say, yes, I'm starting to think about jobs for sure. I haven't started interviewing or taken any steps toward looking at contracts, of course, but I think about it often.
Okay, so we're pre-interview, pre-contract, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Have you had
Yes.
soft conversations with potential employers?
Yes.
What have those been like?
More like we are going to be expanding in 2 years, which is a perfect time for when you're going to be graduating. What are your thoughts about, moving to this area? So, without divulging too much, yes, I have had some conversations, but nothing has been, let's sit down and look at a contract together at this point. More just
How much
conversations.
how much do they or you stay in touch in that situation where it's like, hey, we're going to be here, and maybe that's of interest of you? Is it something that it's like, hey, call us back when you're halfway through second year or a little bit? Maybe not. They probably don't want to wait that long. They probably would like to ink something sooner, but call us back when you think about this, or are they, maintaining a relationship with you, staying in touch? Are you doing likewise, or is it more like we had a conversation and maybe I'll revisit that conversation later?
Yeah, more like the latter. Had a conversation, like reach out when you are, ready to start seriously interviewing. Keeping in touch, at conferences and that kind of thing, of course. Or if, mutual friends cross each other's paths, good way to reach out in that way as well. But more so of let me know when you're ready kind of conversations.
People doing the recruiting, listen up. You're missing the boat, man. Is it people posting on LinkedIn? Come to our event at PCRS. Come to this thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we have an opening in Austin. You and everybody else
Yeah.
has an opening, and so I think that might be a little insight into where people that are recruiting young docs could have an advantage of, if you are having these soft conversations with first years, with maybe even second years, maybe even people in fourth year residency that aren't sure if they're going to get what fellowship program they're going to get accepted into,
Right.
but they think they want to go into REI. Maybe add those folks to a CRM or some way of keeping track of them and actually nurture that relationship over time.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the whole group of first year fellows, but I would say I'm probably speaking for a vast majority of us is, it kind of makes you feel like the belle of the ball when people are reaching out to you and just, planting the seed of, hey, when you start looking, we might be hiring in the next 2 years, or this is what our practice looks like, or just reaching out. I think that if this reaches any of the recruiting docs, first year fellows love that. They like to feel like finally we are the ones that are being sought after and not having to reach out to secure a spot for ourselves. So definitely reach out. That is my advice, if that's not a weird dynamic of me offering advice.
I don't think that it is. I'm offering that advice to the networks, to the clinics, to those that are recruiting younger docs. And I understand that recruitment is like sales. We're very often too busy to do the longer term work because you have to fill a position now.
Right.
And so you're trying to focus on that which is immediately going to be available, where you're going to be able to see the fruits of your labor sooner. But I think that there is a real advantage in starting those relationships early. Because if I'm a recruiter, Morgan, and I know what you like, and I know what you're up to, and I know where you're going to go, I want to just check in with you every now and again. Drop you a text when we're opening that new office, or if our research institute is doing some study. I want to let you know that that's in one of the areas that Morgan's really interested in. So I think that's just a little insight that I hadn't really uncovered under the on the show, because I had always just sort of assumed that, well, it just keeps getting earlier and earlier, the
Yes.
recruitment phase, and it does, but maybe not in earnest.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's probably a little bit of hesitation from a recruiter standpoint of, I don't want to come off sales and pushy. But from a prospective employee standpoint, I do think that reaching out earlier kind of puts that in your mind of, oh, this person reached out when I was really early on, and that's nice to be thought of early on, whether or not it's because they just really need people or because they feel like my personality would, click well with their group. Either way, it is definitely a good feeling when people are reaching out and letting you know the jobs coming available.
What sources of information are you going to for what jobs might be a good fit, or for what you're considering for your career? Like, are you going to docs that are associate REIs someplace? Are you going to the networks themselves and talking to the founders? Are you just asking the folks that are on the board of SREI that do the retreat at Park City? Are you trying to read business info? Are you just in a WhatsApp or iPhone message group with all of the other first years, and it's the blind leading the blind, and
Yeah.
if you'll pardon the expression? Or are you talking to the third years who are like the kids 10 feet ahead of you in the haunted house and asking them what's coming next? Where are you going to make sense of all this?
I love your analogies, Griffin. That's great. So it's almost like when you are in kindergarten and you look at the fourth graders and you're like looking at what they're wearing and what they're doing. And it's like, I want to be like them one day. That's kind of how the first year fellows, I feel like, are treating this process. We're looking at the third years who are, again, I'll use my analogy, the bells of the ball. They're getting recruited, they're getting job offers, they're signing contracts. It's super exciting. You're living kind of vicariously through them. So definitely through the third years, again, Megan Sachs, who is my wonderful third year fellow here, secured a job recently, signed a contract, and will be moving to Chicago. And she has been a great source of information of, which contracts look good because she talks to the other fellows who've also signed contracts. That, and then again, the first year fellow WhatsApp, kind of the blind leading the blind. We haven't really delved into discussing contracts or anything yet, but more living vicariously through the third years of the things that they're doing. I always say this in medicine, and it's a shame that it's never come to fruition, but we really need to be taught more of the business of medicine going through medical school, residency, and now fellowship. You don't have that big piece of medicine, and that's a lot of what REI is business. So I think that I wish you said read a book. I have read books and it's hard to make sense of a lot of it. You almost have to like have a confidant of someone you can say, all right, this is a really dumb question, but just talk me through this business model, or RVUs versus, salaries, guarantees. It's a lot of lingo that you don't start hearing until you really start looking into jobs or hearing people talk that are looking into jobs.
So, in the absence of getting an online MBA, where do you go to get that sort of business education that you're not getting in med school or residency or fellowship?
I'll let you know when I find a good source. I mostly, you know, things that I've talked to or people that I've talked to that have been through the process. I do have a few friends that have gotten their MBAs that are in medicine, and they've kind of shed some light on some of the things that just are a little bit more nuanced than what I'm privy to, being purely clinical this whole time. So I would love to one day get an MBA and be able to understand it more, but I think that I'll keep you posted if I find a good source, or if you know of a great source, book to
Well,
read.
hopefully we're doing a little bit of that here on this show. We don't have anything like online training modules, but I would say to fellows, at least geek out on every one of these episodes. You know,
I have listened
you got
to
to
some.
drive somewhere. You got to listen to something when you're at the gym. So might as well put this on, especially when you're thinking about what comes next. But who has done a better job of actually putting it into modules is my friend Eduardo Harriton, who has made the Fertility Explained series, and then in addition to those things, through there you'll find more people to talk to. You'll also find different resources that we drop along the way of like, oh, here's the best business book I've written or read in the last 3 years, I should say. And this is why. And so I think that's maybe a little piece of advice for the younger docs. And then something that you said made me also think if I'm qualified to give advice, which I'm not, but doesn't stop me from doing it, is get a bit of a cross section of people that you're talking to. Like if first year fellows are only talking to third year fellows, it's like, they don't have a job yet. Like definitely, which is not to discount the knowledge that they have, because they're in the system and they're the ones who know, what's most current, and they're talking to all their peers and they talk to 8 different potential employers, and so they know what's current, and they do have really valuable knowledge to share with you. But then you might talk to somebody who's an associate doc that worked at a practice for 3 years. And then you might talk to someone who is a newer partner. They've been working at a practice from 5 to 7 years and became partner a couple years ago, and what that's been like. And then talk to some folks that are further on in their career as well, and use the amalgamation of all of that to inform your decision. Because I could definitely I could just visualize all the first year fellows in a WhatsApp group together, pinging each other back and forth.
What you're doing?
Yeah, with that sort of thing. Which to me suggests sometimes that they're doing that because that's the easiest person for them to talk to, and they're either shy or they're bashful about not knowing something. Do you find that to be the case with yourself sometimes? How often do you just reach out to somebody out of the blue?
Right, exactly. So it's, I don't know if I would call it shy, more like in general, physicians don't like to have conversations and not be able to bring anything to the table, right? Like we are used to being kind of the expert on things. So I think being, most of us in our 30s, reaching out to someone saying, hey, can you explain this to me? It would be like me reaching out to my financial advisor and asking him like about my taxes. Like there's just things that I know so little about that I don't know where to start or what questions to ask. So yes, I think that getting more information from the right sources would be ideal, but it's hard when you don't really know where to start or who to go to.
So you don't do it terribly often then? Like would you, if you heard a guest on this show, for example, that you thought was really interesting, would you reach out to that person on LinkedIn?
Oh, maybe not on LinkedIn because I don't know my LinkedIn password. But I would, yes, if you provided information, I would feel comfortable reaching out, especially if they had put themselves out there. Like to say, I'm open to communication with people that want to know more about this 100%. Sometimes it's just information overload when you go to Google what books are best for the business of medicine. You get a huge list of things and it's hard to kind of pick out what information is the best, which I think, like you said, it's easiest to go to people that can give you little bits of information in a digestible way. Like friends of friends, or for instance, I recently graduated OBGYN, and a lot of my friends that are now in private or hospital owned generalist groups, I've gotten a lot of information about contracts and business from them because some of them are on a partnership track or can explain a little bit more about their guarantees or RVUs. But I don't know how applicable that is to my field because REI is much different in terms of a business setup than generalist OBGYN.
When it comes to potential employers in the future, are you of the ilk that, well, I'll just talk to anybody? Or is there a bit of apprehension because it's like, well, if I talk to this person, then, then I feel like I either owe them something or I'm worried about wasting their time. And then I feel like I've got to give them more of my time in order for it not to be a waste. And I would rather just put all of that off for a second until I decide a little bit more who I want to talk to. Like, are you of the shotgun approach, or is it more like I'm a bit apprehensive because I don't want to start getting recruited just yet?
No, I would say I'm a little bit of both. I am very open to getting recruited because I want to know what's out there. At this point, I kind of only know Ohio because that's where I've been for so long. But I think just being really upfront and honest, like I'm halfway through my first year. I still have a long time to go. I'm kind of just looking and seeing what's out there and being very transparent in those conversations. If someone were to reach out to me, I'm still looking to see what's out there rather than not wanting to waste someone's time. Because I don't think that getting more information is a waste of anyone's time, especially if you're not setting up like a hour-long meeting with them and taking up their time if you have no interest in going there. If I was recruited to Alaska right now, I think I would probably be transparent in that I might not be moving to Alaska. But in terms of other places or business models, I'm open to hearing whatever's out there and just being very transparent that I am still just very early and continuing to keep my options open and look around.
Do you have an idea of preferences of where you'd like to end up geographically?
I go through this every day when I live in Ohio and it's 5 degrees. I'm like, oh gosh, I'd love to move to somewhere warmer. But then, I'm from the Midwest. So to answer your question, no, I have family. My parents are in Ohio, but otherwise I could see myself going a lot of different places, just depending on the weather in Ohio that day. You can ask me.
So Alaska's off the table, but are there other places where you think no, either that's too rural or it's too that would be too far, or that's too large of a city? Like, are there? So if you're still paring down where you want to be, have you pared down some of where you don't want to be?
A little bit, yeah. I think I would be I guess the area where I could pare down the most is I want to be in an area where I can easily refer patients to multiple specialties. So if someone needs a referral to psych, not having to be in an area where they have to drive 2 hours to see a psychiatrist in person, or if someone needs a referral to GYN oncology, having like an internal referral system, maybe not in the same hospital, but at least near. I think that is important to me, to have a community of people that I can not only reach out to with questions that are more geared toward their specialty, but also send patients to if I'm concerned about a malignancy or if there's a cardiology concern. For instance, I mentioned Turner's patients. There are a lot of cardiac anomalies that can go along with having Turner syndrome. So if those patients need MFM referral to discuss pregnancy complications, or if those patients need cardiac clearance to be able to carry a pregnancy, those are the kind of places that I'm interested in practicing where there is a community of other physicians that I feel comfortable going back and forth with.
I'll let you conclude on this topic, whether it's about how you're structuring your fellowship to get what you want out of your career, or what you're looking at to be able to do once you get that dream job and be able to practice in that way. How would you like to conclude?
Well, I think we've covered a lot, a lot of basis here. I think in conclusion, I would say I'm interested in practicing at a group that is willing to let me kind of see the patients that I'm interested in seeing, have autonomy, get involved in the business side of the practice. And then also just having great partners to work with. I've realized through many years of medical training that the people that you work with can really make or break your daily mood and your general outlook on medicine. So having good partners, having support, mentorship, all of those things are important to me. So I think that probably can echo what a lot of first year fellows would say is we want to be able to go to someone that has more experience to ask for help, and also be happy where we're working.
Well, you've put yourself out there, so if any of these folks are smart, they will use this as an opportunity to reach out to you, and they'll take our advice, and they'll stay in touch with you and build that relationship over time based on what you've shared you're interested in, and I appreciate you doing that on this podcast. Dr. Morgan Wilhoite, thank you very much for coming on the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thanks, Griffin. It's a pleasure.
This episode was brought to you by Prelude Fertility, where top REI physicians find their calling. Practice anywhere with Prelude. The Prelude Network is the fastest growing network of fertility clinics in North America. With more than 90-plus locations, we're ready to support you and your individual career aspirations wherever they lead. To learn more, please visit rei.preludefertility.com. That's rei.preludefertility.com.
Today's advertiser helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertiser. The advertiser does not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertiser. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.